far as the Coleman, that's up there by St. Marie where all that brick is, them horse stalls. Hey, Tom Coleman is the guy's name, and he set that halfway house, or whatever they wanted to call it. He had a big rooming house, and he could put in 1915, he could put 150 horses. So that's 75 teams. You guys straighten their wheat and stuff down to Glasgow. They'd come halfway and stay there. My great-grandparents and my granddad, they'd come there. Then they'd bring their wheat down, and in the wintertime they'd either have a 4-horse hookup to break this trail. And they would stay there, and the next day they'd come to Glasgow and go to the flour mill and have it ground up for flour. And the other half was probably sold for cash or whatever. Took their list to the grocery store, and there was no grocery carts. So they'd leave their list there, they'd pick up their groceries and go back, take a 3-day trip to get back to Avondale. Avondale was a big community in then. And on my dad's side, they left Danforth, Illinois, and stopped at Church's Ferry, which is by Devil's Lake, North Dakota, for a year. And I think my dad's older brothers, my dad was only 2. He had 5 brothers, and they worked in a grain fields thrashing. Then they had then my grandpa, he sold some horses and stuff, and then they'd come to Glasgow the next year. And that's how I've been here forever. In the late 40s, we had a 2-year-old horse, and he got out with the wild horses, so me and my dad was looking for him in the spring, and I'm 10 or 11 years old, I don't remember what. And I'm going down this trail, and I see these horse tracks, and I brought some my souvenirs, and I'll pass them around. I found a dinosaur. They're heavy, petrifying. So when you touch these, you can tell your grandkids and that you touch something 60 million years old. The vertebrates.
Wow, man.
I was following these horse tracks down a ridge. My dad was one over. They were looking for these horses so we could get this colt. And I following this ridge, and I'm heading west. Then I see these tracks, so I'm going north. And I go down there and follow these horse tracks, and they're probably a day or 2 old. And here was the small vertebrae until them big ones. And the hip bone and everything. So I've had these for 75 years. I'll take them to the event center this summer. I don't have nobody to give them to, so they just well have them. Yeah, we never did find that colt then, but we found out later that Don Burke and Bill Anderson had corralled a bunch of horses, so that colt was in with them. But we got him. As long as I'm on the wild horses, they gathered a couple years later, I think it was early 50s. They called it a county roundup, and they corralled them up there at the old Tim Whiting place, which my Uncle Ray Uphaus had. Got them together, and Ray's wife is a Hanley, her brother's Marcus, and he flew a Cub airplane together. And me and my brother, we helped him, we trailed him to town. I think we had 130-some head. Throw some saddle horses in with them. Come across the old bridges, and then come across 2nd Avenue Dike. And we tipped over to either 3rd or 4th, so we didn't want to come down Main Street with them. And most of them wild horses, they're pretty spooky. They're going looking at, you know. Then we come out by the Civic Center, and then hit highway, Fort Beck Highway, and corral them. And a lot of them horses had brands on, the homesteaders had left. So they would, price whatever they brought for every $20. That went to the tax road, to the county. There was 3 slick horses in there, and they give the check to me and my brother, $65 for 3 horses. So we split that, but that was a lot of money for a 12-year-old kid, $37.50. And then the rest of them were branded, and whoever, you know, but most of it, so that was it. They wanted to clear all the wild horses out south. When I was growing up, about all that was out south was wild horses and sheep. As long as we're talking about sheep, my dad, he was trapping coyotes, I think, and he come with sheep herders out there, and he come to one of them. And he had evidently his toothache probably bothered him 2 or 3 days. So he wanted my dad to heat up a little piece of wire, get it red hot, stick it in that tooth, kill the nerve. My dad said he was shaking worse than the old sheep. So he said he jabbed that in there, and the old boy said, wrong tooth. So he had to do it again. And he said, feel good. He spit out some blood and cooked him dinner. Tough people. Ugh. Imagine burning your lip. I don't even think they had a mirror. Red hot thing trying to get. Are we driving him crazy for a couple, 3 days? So he's going to take extremes. Another thing, if you're riding out there, them Badlands, alkali, hard pan, the water's bad. You got to take your pants down before you take a drink. Pretty physical. After that, you don't drink it. Get a rock and suck on a rock. And another time, I think we was about a freshman in high school. Me and my brother and Gene and Walt Haynes, we went south, and we got over there with the Little Beaver. And then we went up to the China place, and Whitmires was gathering 2 and 3 year old steers, so we helped him for a day or two. Howard Whitmire took us over and showed us the last of the wild horses. Yeah, they were wilder than antelope. Yeah, them guys talked to Bob Whitmire after that. They trailed them steers into Tampico, but Moscow and Malvik had too many white granaries. Spooked them, so they couldn't crowd them. He trailed them to Van Daly and got them there and put them on a car. I don't know, had 200 or 300 of them. And them things, you know, them days pretty much wintered out, so they never seen a human being except when they branded their ship. Yeah, we just helped them. And on my mother's side, they'd leave up there and heat up a rock, stand on a rock, till they got to the Coleman place. Then the next day come to Glasgow, get their supplies, and go back 3-day trip. The railroad didn't come to Uphaus, I think, till 26 or 28. You hear me? I'm supposed to be talking to this, you know. So most of them guys, they were probably only in Everett part knows what them little wagons probably only hold 100 bushel or 70 bushel or 90 bushel. Maybe in the summertime they hook 2 together and then they could haul 100 bushel. Teams of horses. They were big. My great granddad, he'd give us a 4-side coat, heavy. This kind of weather is decent, but then they'd come at 20 below partly. Tough people. Gotta admire them. Oh, they got them going around. Yeah, passed. Oh, did everybody get to feel them? Have they been around? Yeah. All the way. Okay, I got some pictures here. Only 2 of them I can find. These are cows swimming the Missouri River. 1940. November 1. Pass these around. If you look there, it was on the south side, and this is when the lake is first coming up. You probably see 6 or 7 horses there. They pushed them in. Yep. Then they're Then they're bringing them by a boat. They didn't want to put them saddle horses in the river, because you tip them over. And I think when they got done, they just got in the boat and led their horses across. This is at the Barrett place. Charlie and Clara. She was a Barrett, and this is probably the last time they grazed these cows on both sides of the river. Fort Beck was coming up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Making them swim. They probably had a sandbar to go part way out and they fill in it. So my dad helped him get them in the water.
Hey, Bill,
Yes.
I got a question for you.
Yeah, I'll answer.
Dinosaur bones there, I just wondered if you ever had a chance, when you ever had a chance to saddle one of them up.
One of the wild horses?
No, dinosaur. Ever saddle one up?
No. 60 million years old.
Oh,
Before I think of some other stories. Oh, when we went over there to help Whitmars gather them steers, we stopped there at the Fremont Gideon place on Little Beaver. And they had bunk beds in this old rock house. And you got dark and then feel them mice run across your tarp, so couldn't stand that, so we had to sleep outside. Yeah, it wasn't good. Them little feet on your tarp. Didn't want them in bed with you, so we moved out. Then the next day we got over that China place. There were no fences out south then. The only fence you seen was around that China camp. And the next fence you didn't hit till you got to Timber Creek Bill Anderson's. 60 miles. You could ride without opening the gate. Bill, he always stayed at our place and he'd lead 2 or 3 horses and he'd change horses part way and he'd make it one day. Dawson, they know Anderson. I don't know any other stories. Everett, maybe I'll think of something after Everett says.
Bill, tell them.
Any other questions?
Just tell them what you took for lunch when you rode all day.
Oh, yeah, you didn't want to drink that water and you never took a canteen. You usually took a can of tomatoes or peaches. Then you could open with your jackknife and I eat that, give you some moisture. Any other questions?
Whatever happened to the China family? I've never.
A China camp, them guys, Peter, China, and John, they went
No
south of Malta.
offspring? No kids?
Pete was the guy's name, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think his son is Gene or them guys.
Nobody around here anymore of the
No,
family?
no, they left in the 30s.
Bill,
Yes,
Yeah, the China Ranch is still east of the Little Rockies, south of Malta.
yeah.
And that has been purchased by the American Prairie Reserve.
Oh,
Yeah.
And
I think,
Fred was the last one.
I think it was at Circle C Ranch, wasn't
I
it?
thought the China place.
Then it was a Matador,
Conservancy.
where China got it.
That's a,
that's
The
the
Nature
Buffalo.
Conservancy,
Yeah.
not the APR.
Same thing now.
Is it?
Yeah.
When did that happen?
money talks.
We weren't looking.
I think it was Circle C, Coburn Brothers. And then when they sold out, they sold it to the Matador Ranch in China. Been over there in the 30s. There's some of them younger ones over there yet. Any other questions? Maybe I'll think of something later. Yes.
Yeah, Bill used to tell us a story about the rustlers, hanging the rustlers. That was sort
Oh.
of an interesting story.
Oh, back at, well, they trailed, you know, Stewart and that other Phillips and them guys from Malta. They was getting their cows and horses stole. There's a book that tells about this, but they hired these, well, they called them cowboy stranglers to take care of the rustlers. So I think it's down there by Cow Island or Cow Creek, just the other side of Robinson Bridge. So these guys come by this camp and there was all these guys there. So they hung them 13. Most that's ever been hung at one time in Montana. They probably didn't break their necks, they just strung them up. So then they found a letter in one of them guys' shirt. He was about an 18-year-old kid. He was going to Fort Benton to get on the boat to go back down the Missouri River to see his mother in Iowa. But he stopped for coffee of the night, and he shouldn't have stopped. So they didn't know if they got the innocents or whatever. They hung them all. That stopped the rustling.
Did they stop it?
Yeah, I guess. That's what they said. They called them the Cowboy Stranglers, and some of them guys are pretty much outlaws anyway. I guess they come up from Wyoming, the Johnson County Wars down there, and then that got taken care of, and them guys, these guys south of Mall, or these guys, their association hired them to get rid of the rustlers. Them guys, well, we're talking about Pearson. I think his dad come up with Texas Trail, right? Ernest Pearson. Them guys had a hard life. Most of them were southern boys. There's no plantation to go back to. So they come up with 2,000 or 3,000 head of them. Then lots of times it'd be 2 or 3 herds in a row. And they get up here to Montana, it's the best grass they ever seen. Or too much mystique in yeah. And them cattle were wild. They didn't have nobody to take care of them during the Civil War. That's where they could gather up all them free grass. Same with the sheep people out there. They just grazed. Am I 20 minutes up?
A little different era. I got all these notes and I'm not too organized, so anyway, I'm going to start out on the homesteaders. And in fact, Julie, my daughter, and I, we were looking up the bill, and the Homestead Act was passed after the Civil War. And I knew that it was for only a 5-year, you had to farm the land for 5 years, and then you got the land. And you could get 1/4 of, each person could get 160 acres of that. Anyway, there was a new little wrinkle when we looked it up, and it said that you could get this permit for the homestead quarter of land if you hadn't, if you were a citizen and hadn't taken up arms against the government. Anyway, so that's where I'm at. Anyway, my folks they didn't come from the old country. They might as well have been. They grew up, they were born in Minnesota. And they finished the 8th grade. My dad was born in Sleepy Eye and my mother in kind of the middle state of Minnesota. And they both graduated from the 8th grade, and that was about as far as you went. And about, well, they got married in 1910, so probably 1902, so is when they would have graduated out of school. But anyway, my dad, graduated in the spring, 8th grader. That fall, he was out on the flats in North Dakota spiking, which was, you had the binders and you bound the grain and you had bundles to put into the wagon. And that was the guy, he was the spiker, the one that put the bundles into the wagon. Anyway, he ended up staying in North Dakota. And my mother immigrated to Kenmare, and they both worked in a laundry for probably not much wages, but by 1910, I guess they felt they had enough money to get married, and so they came to Montana and homesteaded. And so my mother had one quarter of land, my dad had another. After it was kind of going off the beaten path that okay, we're talking about, each gets 160 acres. We had a fellow in our neighborhood named Seaver Hansen. He was 4 or 5, he's on the Roosevelt Trail. And we did end up buying his place at one time, and so a year or so after I was up there, and he was sitting out in the yard. They were still living on the land, and he was out with the granary. And so I asked him, I said, well, when did you get married? And all that old stuff. I knew nothing about him. And, well, he said, we homesteaded here. She lived on that side of the road. I lived on this side of the road. She was there for 11 years. She didn't go back to Minnesota. And do you know what I did? I went back and I got her and brought her back. The reason I say that, I imagine there was plenty of situations like that. I mean, I imagine she was sitting home at night, well, why doesn't he ever come over and see me? And probably vice versa. I'm sure those were similar situations, not only in that time, probably in our present day. Anyway, to get back, I wanted to get back to our neighborhood on the North Bench. And, the Homestead Act kind of ended up being a melting pot. My folks were German. We had excellent Norwegian neighbors, Nels Dawkins. The Nyquist were from Sweden. Grandpa Nyquist, I understood, came from Sweden. And oh, I'm sorry. The Nyquist were Swedish, so I call it kind of a melting pot that we had in our area. And just to and I'm going to get into kind of what living was like in the 30s and everything, if you're interested in. Anyway, everybody says the 30s were bad. I was lucky. My dad started working on Fort Peck Dam when it first started in 1933, so that kind of made a little bit easier on the farm. But Dad really he rented the farm out for that matter until the 40s. But anyway, let's see, where am I at now? Anyway,
They cleaned brush at 32, 33.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to bring out a few things. Okay. They always talk about the big dust bowl that we had in the South, Grapes of Wrath and those movies. Well, we equal that. I remember the folks used to either invite people for Sunday dinner or they were invited out. Anyway, I remember this was during the 30s, they were invited to town for Thanksgiving dinner. And couldn't go that day. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face, But it wasn't a snowstorm, it was a dust storm. So we had the dust bowl here too. And that was because during the 20s, pretty well all of the homestead land got broke up and they farmed it. And I can remember the 160 acres all broken up. And so that was, of course, when Roosevelt came in, why they came up with a program to put the strips in a 10-acre strips. In fact, you got paid 10 cents an acre. So what else? Well, might be interested in what people did for recreation. Well, my folks would invite people for dinner on Sunday, and they'd get invited places for Sunday dinner, and afterwards, naturally, a whiskey. We had, I was lucky, there was 2 other boys within my age in my neighborhood. Ralph Belzer, only 3/4 of a mile away. Bob Platt was 3/4 of a mile away. And we would, one week we'd go to his place, next week we'd go to the other place, and then they'd be at my place. And I can remember, they'd come up there and, well, we really didn't have any toys to play with. There was no money to buy toys or anything. But I can't say we felt deprived or anything. We made our own deal. We made a town out of using rocks for cars and stuff. So I can't say that we felt deprived just because we didn't have no toys or anything. So it seemed to work out. So then when I think of our neighborhood, well, I can visualize, you know, this RCA ad that you see, and you hear the dog has got his ear to the big loudspeaker. Well, I can visualize that because the Platts that live about 3/4 of a mile away, they bought one of these new RCA radios. And Amos and Andy was on Thursday night. So the neighbors would go down to the Platt place to listen to Amos and Andy on Thursday night. And I don't think we made it down that often, but maybe once or twice during the summer. But that picture that you see of the dog listening to them, well, that's what I remember, because us kids couldn't go in the house. It had to be still because they were all having ears to that big microphone. So that is one thing of entertainment. My mother loved to dance. I don't know how many of you remember the old Cherry Creek Hall. It was up on Jensen Trail, or not Jensen Trail, but on the Cut Across Road about a mile east of Holters. And so on Saturday night they'd have, I can remember Mrs. Stradart, she could chord the piano, but that was good enough for the dancers. Anyway, we'd go up there and there was an old organ in the old Cherry Creek Hall. By that time there was 2, the old original schoolhouse it was, and then they added the hall onto it. They had an organ and they lay all the coats on top of there, and so folks would go to the dance hall, and I'd go to sleep on top of that piano or old organ. Well, I don't know if you have trouble, but you know, I can get a tune in my head on the first of the day, and it goes down in my head all day long. Well, I blame it on laying on that organ and listening to that piano. It's pounding away. You wouldn't have that trouble, would you, Norm? Anyway, so, gosh, we get ready to go home one night and get out to the car. And I think Dad had a 32 Chevrolet, and of course, you know, or Plymouth. And, you know, the headlight was like that. And we used to go to an old swimming hole, too, and you thought you were somebody to sit on that fender and grab the headlight and hold on to it. Anyway, I got my chance that night. Dad got out to the car, and there was no lights didn't work. So for somewhere or another, he had a flashlight in the car. And we lived about 8 miles from that schoolhouse, and there was an old, east of where Fast lived now, pretty deep pool. It was kind of hairy because you couldn't see. The flashlights weren't very good in those days. Anyway, I can't remember that. I don't know. It seemed like it took forever to get home. But anyway, it was one of them things that happened. Then too, after Dad had a few dollars in his pocket, why, during the summer, the Orpheum Theater, you know, that's just a couple stores east of the Western Drug, right in there, the old Orpheum building. Oh man, they had some sort. I recall they had some sort of a big cash drawing on Saturday night. So, oh gosh, my dad, he had to take us to that. Maybe it wasn't often, once or twice a summer, but I think it was a big drawing for $25 or something. That place would just be packed to the gills.
Yeah. Saturday matinee,
Yeah.
12 cents,
Yeah.
Rocky Theater.
Well, yeah, that's right. And like I say, I did live in, so then, well, maybe I'll move on to, well, okay, just to kind of get along, okay, the big survival with a lot of people, I know my folks did. I don't even remember that as a kid, but they always raised one hatch or two of turkeys, and they dressed them in the fall, and then they could take it, and they were all gathered up, and they put on the boxcar and go east for Thanksgiving, I suppose. Anyway, and the way they raised turkeys, it didn't cost them anything. They would turn them out in the field, but then they had to gather them at night so the coyotes couldn't get them. And so I have an old bell with a leather strap that they put around neck of the turkey, but I couldn't find it. But anyway, that was so that in the evening you knew where the turkeys was and you could go out and gather them up. Anyway, it wasn't much, that little, but I can remember I think it was called the 27th Skidoo train would gather the cream cans, and you'd see the guys down along the railroad. But this was a kind of combination train. They'd have a passenger train on it, and then they had this car that all the cream cans, and I think they were going to Minot to be processed. And of course, then later on we had our own creamery here. Cream was a big thing. In fact, my mother was making at the High Line made 100 pounds of butter in one day, and it was quite a lifesaver because for some reason, even during the 30s, you could get $1 a pound for butter, so that was quite a money maker. So, well then, it seemed like storms were always a big deal, which we have storms now. Everybody talked about, well, some people had rip cellars to keep because they had to keep their crops for year round, as long as they could. We didn't have a root cellar because after Dad built his house, where the cellar was good enough. So, but anyway, I was going to say, as soon as we knew a storm was brewing, we'd head for the basement because cyclones were quite prevalent. And I remember this later, only a few years ago, in fact, and I remembered we were standing out in the field north of the homestead there, and he said, this is where I'd known that the chicken coop was all kind of patched together, and he said, well, this is where the chicken coop got blowing when we had that big wind. And I started thinking about it, and I thought, Now, wait a minute. That was 300 yards or 300 feet from where the chicken coop was. You didn't even call it a cyclone. It had to have been a tornado. I got to thinking about it. So a lot of things happened that were never even mentioned because nobody took it in stride, and that's what the way it was. Okay, so we're going backwards now. My dad and mom, they've homesteaded and they got married. And, well, he came out first and built the homestead shack in 1990, the year before they got married. So he just put the homestead shack on the southwest corner of the land. And so he was working late one night on the shack, and another fellow that had homesteaded earlier, named Dan Farquhar, Howard Farquhar was his son, if you remember that name around town. He was a contractor at Glasgow. And told him, well, you're welcome to stay at my place while you're building your shack, Pete. He always called my dad Pete for Peter. And so he was working late at night and worked kind of late, and all of a sudden, I thought I better get going. And so he headed for this light. And, well, he got to this shack, but it didn't look right. Anyway, that's the way he met Nelson Dawkins. Anyway, he seen Nelson Dawkins' light, which was a mile west, and Dan Farquhar was a mile south. So this brings me into telling some stories about Nelson Dawkins. Quite a fellow. And now is when I talk about this being a melting pot. I mean, Dawkins were Norwegians, we were Germans, the Nyquist were Swedes. And I always remember Nelson Dawkins, he still, my parents graduated out of the 8th grade in Minnesota, not knowing any English. They graduated in German. And growing up, my folks didn't even have a brogue. In fact, when I asked Mom to count up to 10, she'd always forgotten. So when they came here, they wanted to speak English, but anyway, I always remember Nelson Dawkins, and he had quite a brogue. He says, "We come to America. We are Americans. We speak English." And he meant it. And he was quite a fellow. And so that leads me up to when Dad met him and where he homesteaded, which is that mile west of where the present Dawkins place was built. He dug a well, and I still can't figure out how, but they tell about that he dug a well there, about 80 foot deep, and he dug it by himself, no help, and he carried all the dirt from digging that well out and, I tried to figure out how he would have done that, but it just, they had to have been long days then. In fact, I can remember my dad, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he had to have a couple sandwiches. But, now it's diesel fuel that does the job. So I think we kind of covered, like I say, it was kind of neat that I had 3 boys kind of my age to grow up with. like I say, we had our own entertainment. I have to kind of tell this. I hate to even admit this with my kids here, but they don't even know this. So anyway, when they came to our place, well, I don't know, we thought that maybe smoking was a big deal. So there was pieces of cottonwood, you know, it became airy and called it punkwood. So when they'd come up to my place, we had these old pieces of punk hidden, and we'd have one smoke on that. And I guess maybe it done the job because I never had a desire to take a puff off of a cigarette. So I guess there's a reason for everything. Okay, well, we'll go to school then. Okay. Yeah, we had a rural school 2 miles from our place, right at the Nyquist place. But it got closed up when I was going to be in the first grade. I don't know what the reason was. I hope I wasn't the reason. But, at that time, the school bus routes were just, I don't know how they done it on a bid basis or anything. Anyway, Dawkins had to bid for the snow bus, for the school bus that year. And anyway, I rode the school bus. In fact, Nels Dawkins had there was a regular bus deal put on a Dodge frame. But, and that was neat, boy. I'd walk over to their place and get on the bus, and it was great. But then by the time Christmas came, guess what? The only thing that would run would be a sleigh. So I think we're the only class that ever had to do the route that had to do it. But anyway, we rode the sleigh into town every day for 6 weeks. Then, of course, I was in first grade, and I thought it was great. I'd get on at 6 o'clock and go to sleep. And they'd wake me up when I got to school at 8. But the biggest thing was, I thought that was a great thing for a kid. We were told to take an extra sandwich log. Well, there was a wood heater in the middle of the sleigh. And then we just all thought that was something. We got to toast our sandwiches on that wheel, you know. Anyway, we rode that sleigh for 6 weeks, going to get home at 6 o'clock. And I was a first grader, so I slept both ways, so it didn't bother me. So then, like I said, finally would have been the school year of 34, 35. My dad had the school bus. And so he bought in fact, Mark Watson was on the school board, and that's why he bought an International, because he worked for Barcos. Anyway, it was a 10.5 truck, and he built a school bus on it, and the seats over the deal. And you kind of wonder, I always think this is kind of neat, you kind of wonder, well, wouldn't it have been kind of cool back there? No, it was comfy as could be. One of the shops in town, they took the exhaust pipe from the motor and run it back, and then put two about 1.25 inch pipes through the whole middle of the school bus, and it was cozy as could be in there, if you can believe that. Especially when you're going alone and going through a foot of snow, because by Christmas time, well, at Thanksgiving time, I was riding home with my dad, and it took him a whole hour to come home that day. And he just had in low gear and the chains on, wore a pair of chains on getting home. And so he said, we can't do that. So then we stayed for 1 month down at on the Roosevelt Trail. It would have been the old Oliver house, and we stayed there for a month. And then after the first year, for another 6 weeks, 2 school bus routes, the one from the Badger community here and from Ardale, we stayed in the schoolhouse. And there was a mother from each school bus route that cooked the meals out in the Quebec room. And of course, that was a fun time for for a young kid. I can always remember there was maybe 15, 16 boys of us in one room. And, them guys got to go out, stay out till 10 o'clock, and they'd be always kind of noisy coming in. But it didn't bother us younger kids. So that was some firsts. I don't know if they're good firsts or not, but I think we're about the only bunch that ever rode the sleigh for 6 weeks to the school, and the school bus route the same. So that kind of, let's see, what else do we have here? Well, okay, we're up to the dad days. I've read, and in the fall of 1933, when FDR, he signed the bill to construct, it was about the end of September, to construct Fort Peck Dam. Anyway, my dad, they had a job hiring clinic, or just had advertised, come and interview for a job. And this was sometime in November of 1953, less than 2 or 3 months. Anyway, they wanted to get barracks built, so there was a place for the signalmen to live in starting the next spring. So they worked all that winter. Anyway, Dad went and they says, well, are you a carpenter or a laborer? Oh, he said, I did build our house, I guess, out home and stuff. Well, you're a carpenter. And he said it was good because all he did all winter was, if not familiar, had to use a 20-ounce carpenter hammer, which is heavier than the standard hammer, and pounding 20 penny nails, and near the heavy nail that named the big timber to the cross timber. But he got to do that all winter. But I remember him saying, oh man, he said, it'd be 20 below and blowing out there, and you wanted to go home, and no, it's 15 guys waiting to take your job at the superintendent's shop if you went home. So that's just the way the cookie crumbled. And just for interest, his wage was $1.20. It was the top wage paid on the deal. Plumbers and carpenters and a few others was the top wage. Laborers received 50 cents. And, you don't think it's going to go that much, but okay. Well, I'll back up. Okay, the Belzers, they had a wedding. In fact, Howard Farquhar was marrying the daughter of these Belzers that was our neighbors, and they had a chivalry, and us, that was a time when you took disc blades and pounded them and made a big deal. They called it chivalry, but anyway, what I was getting at is that Howard was working on the dam at his shack, and he built a house in town working at a laborer's wage. So 50 cents an hour seemed to go along pretty good, and of course it was a gold mine to my dad, making $1.20 after, which I'll bring up. One other thing I want to bring up was during the 30s, well, of course, things were pretty tough. There was no feed, and Dad always had milk cows. And what I remember, that was, oh my gosh, I had to get up there at an early age and get on top of the hay wagon to stack it. It was these Russian thistles. They were dirty and dusty, but there was no other way to do it, so. The only nice thing was, that's still the most, nicest feel there is to ride on a load of hay pulled by the horses. You know, just kind of.
My dad told about Granddad Cornwell when they were stacking thistles in that time, and Dad was up on the stack, you know. He said just about the time his legs got really sore from these thistles, Granddad decided if they'd salt it, why the cows would eat it better.
Then your milk cow could hit a knothole at 40 paces.
That.
They really loosened them up then.
I wasn't really going to bring that up, but we always had 10, 12 cows, and before you stepped across to walk behind them, you made sure that there wasn't any tail twitching. That's no kidding. They were a laxative, if you're not aware of that. Well, okay, we're at the dam now. Maybe we're making progress. Oh, maybe about 20 minutes is up.
I can tell you, them pictures I passed around, that was on Beauchamp Creek. That's on the other side of Fourchette Bay, South Phillips
We
County.
better label them, Bill.
What?
Label them on the map, right where they are.
I got the date.
Where they are.
Yeah, that was the old Barrett place. Birdie and Chick Boyd. She was in Barrett. Claire Pearson.
Charlie Pearson.
Well, you're looking there. I thought of something else. There was 2 outlaws here in South Valley. You guys know him. Frank Taylor and there's the other guy's name, George Brown.
Yes, his brother.
Yeah. Okay. Frank Taylor gave himself up to the authorities. Paul Hoffman authority. They went to Wyoming. He was part of the Hole in the Wall gang. And when the river come up, Brown was Taylor Cooley. You guys lived there, didn't you? Taylor Cooley?
Yeah, bought the Taylor place, yes.
Yeah.
You know, we knew Frank well, but we didn't
Yeah.
know his history at that time.
Then when Brown went to Canada, when the Woodpeck Lake come up, I think when he died, that's when Frank gave himself up. Because they shot a conductor, and I think Brown probably was the one that shot him. His name was Charles Whitney. So I asked Haynes, you know, I was going to the World's Fair in Seattle, Washington, in 1962. He said he was in Columbia Falls in the street, but he didn't know the number, so I get to Columbia Falls on the way to Seattle. So I go down the street and I asked this mailman, but they wouldn't tell you them days. So he just kind of, I see him point his head down, so it was a dead end street, so the matter is elimination. So I knocked on the door, and about the second door I knocked, Frank come in, and I said, "Hello, Frank," and he talked real slow, because I spent all them years on the lam, he didn't want to give himself up. So he says to me, he says, "My name is Charles." He was from Wyoming, and he kind of regretted he never got back to see his mother before his mother passed away. But he was just an 18-year-old kid when they robbed that train. The conductor got shot. But he herded sheep out there for Jameson Murray or maybe Carter. What's that?
I believe he homesteaded the
Yeah,
place.
I think both of them went in the First World War too.
He was, yes.
Yeah, the guy you talked, and they said that after they found out that his brothers, they kind of made a resemblance. George Brown. Yeah, that Cooley's out there, Page Witham has it, it's Taylor Cooley. Runs into Sutherland.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said, my name is real slow, real sharp. And all I knew him by was Frank. There, you got your notes?
Well, yeah, just another deal in, well, of course, naturally, there's no electricity, so, like I said, the radio was a big deal. So I kind of remember when, finally got a 6-volt wind charger. And, so then, could have a radio. I think the women even talked about it. Anyway, my mom wouldn't miss Ma Perkins. And then, of course, later on, 32-volt wind charger was kind of nice today. And I was going to say it's kind of something I always remember. Okay, when Dad had the school bus, and we stayed at, well, they were close to the place on the Roosevelt Trail there. Why, this 35 International truck, they didn't start very good anyway. Anyway, I can remember drain the alcohol out of the radiator, sometimes drain the oil, take it in the house and warm it up, and even one morning they did all that and must not have worked so good, so they even took out some whole hot coals to put underneath that whole motor to get it started. So a lot of that was kind of the hard way to make a headbolt heater, but and so the dam days, well, Dad kind of worked most of the time there. Like I say, wasn't working the fall of the year that he had the school bus, and there wasn't work everywhere. But so then we were in town on 35 and 36, and of course the big deal that year was. I think I walked to school on some day in February. Anyway, didn't know it at the time, but found out that's the coldest day we've ever had. 59 below. Yeah, and my dad's 34 Chevy wouldn't start that morning. I think he was working out at Chicago Bridge and at that time. In fact, that was kind of a thing I remember. Once in a while, my dad then would take us Sunday and had to show us what he'd been doing. And he was working for this Chicago Bridge, and they had a huge building. But anyway, they were constructing the tunnels. And I always remember it was such a beautiful sight watching them guys heat up the big old rivets. They'd be red hot. And them guys would throw them up there like they're, throw a little peanut over their deal. Every time they just land right in the bucket up there. And those were big. But that just, I guess, the little boys. And another thing that's kind of interesting that I never forget, I always remind them about every time I go to Fort Peck about where you see the new boathouses that they put up left of there about 2 or 3 miles inside of Wheeler. Those hilltops were lined with packing crates. And finally, there was a sign and it said, "Little Minot." Yeah, the guys, they put up packing crates to stay in, and from what I understood, they stayed there maybe a couple of weeks and then go home for the weekend and come back and work. again, but that was just part of the dam days, part of the 10,000 people that worked on that dam. So there was all sorts. And, well, I could remember, well, I've got another first. I like to tell you about all my firsts. We were living in town and the underpass had just opened up. And there was 3 or 4 of us kids. And of course, as you know, that underpass loves to flood. Well, there was about 4 of us. We were the first ones to ever swim in the underpass. So
I'm not sure you were ahead of me.
I mean, that was pretty clean water compared to the upriver. Well, any questions? Probably. I can remember, of course, naturally, everybody burned lignite coal in this area. There was coal mine up by Oak Pine. Remember, Dad got coal and everybody said, well, you hauled out more ashes than coal that you hauled in, so that's the quality of coal that they used. Oh, yeah, I got, okay. Neighbor and friend, John Purcell. He came here he was from Pennsylvania. And so when he got a little bit older there, he phoned me up and wanted me to take him out hunting. And I missed the boat entirely. He'd tell me all these stories. I wasn't interested in any of that stuff at all. I do remember one story. He was still a 17-year-old kid, and he was just, and he had to take, he worked at the Coleman Hotel, and of course Coleman Hotel was the gathering ground. In fact, as I understand it, that's where you got your homestead permits, a lot of that stuff at the old Coleman Hotel, which is just east of the railroad crossing on the south side there. And anyway, where was I? Liz? Time's up. I knew she was going to say that. See how well she's trained? Oh, let's see. Oh, yeah. Okay, so he's a 17-year-old kid, and he was told, well, take this dinner upstairs. And so he climbed to the second story, because they had hotel rooms on the second story of the old Coleman Hotel. And he said, he took this tray of food up there and opened the door, and man, he said, across the room, of course the rooms are small, so he was pretty close to him. He said, man, I'm looking right straight down the barrel of a gun. There's a guy sitting in the chair there with a gun at me. Oh, the guy says, I put his gun down. Come on in, kid, you're okay. Anyway, I can't remember the name of the gangster that John said that was, but it's one of the famous ones. So, but anyway, he told more stories than what I kind of remember. Well, okay, he lived out in the North Bench, just a mile east on Lindale Road, and he get done work at night, and he'd walk out to his still a homestead shack then, I think, and he said he could get up on top of the hill, and you're probably all familiar, there's that graveyard to the left of the road going to the landfill. Well, he said he could get up on top of the hill and go towards that, and then all he had to do was go, he was just another mile north, kind of a little bit north said that's a good landmark. But, so that, well, not really much. I would like to say, I just kicked myself for not listening to him tell me all them stories when we were out, because he would have more history to gone through that era.